Hello. All right. So one of my most favorite, I know I say that a lot, but this one is really, really great. And it's called Bad Case of Stripes by David Shannon. And the Cubs and I have been talking about messages and stories. So after I read this fiction text, I want you to think about what is the message that the author meant by writing this text. Camellia Cream loved lima beans, but she never ate them. All of her friends hated lima beans and she wanted to fit in. Camellia was always worried about what other people thought of her. Today she was fretting even more than usual. It was the first day of school and she couldn't decide what to wear. There were so many people to impress. She tried on 42 outfits, but none seemed quite right. She put on a pretty red dress and looked in the mirror. Then she screamed. Her mother ran into the room and she screamed too. "Oh my heavens," she cried, "you're completely covered with stripes." This was certainly true. Camellia was striped from head to toe. She looked like a rainbow. Mrs. Cream felt Camelia's forehead. "Do you feel all right?" she asked. "I feel fine," Camellia answered, "but just look at me." "You get back in bed this instant," her mother ordered. "You're not going to school today." Camellia was relieved. She didn't want to miss the first day of school, but she was afraid of what the other kids would say. She had no idea what to wear with those crazy stripes. That afternoon, Dr. Bumble came to examine Camellia. "Most extraordinary," he explained. "I'd never seen anything like it. Are you having any coughing, sneezing, runny nose, aches, pains, chills, hot flashes, dizziness, shortness of breath, or uncontrollable twitching?" "No," Camellia told him. "I feel fine." "Well then," Dr. Bumble said, turning to Mrs. Cream, "I don't see any reason why she shouldn't go to school tomorrow. Here's some ointment that should keep her clear to help clear up the stripes in a few days. If it doesn't, you know where to reach me." And off he went. The next day was a disaster. Everyone at school laughed at Camellia. They called her Camellia Crayon and Night of the Living Lollipop. She tried her best to act as if everything were normal, but when the class said the Pledge of Allegiance, her stripes turned red, white, and blue. And she broke out in stars. The other kids thought this was great. One yelled out, "Let's see some purple polka dots." Sure enough, Camellia turned all purple polka dotty. Someone else shouted, "Checkerboard," and a pattern of squares covered her skin. Soon everyone was calling out different shapes and colors, and poor Camellia was changing faster than you can change channels on a TV. That night, Mr. Harms, the school principal, called. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Cream," he said. "I'm going to have to ask you to keep Camellia home from school. She's too much of a distraction, and I've been getting calls from other parents. They're afraid those stripes might be contagious." Camellia was so embarrassed. She couldn't believe that 2 days ago everyone liked her. Now nobody wanted to be in the same room with her. Her father tried to make her feel better. "Is there anything I can get you, sweetheart?" he asked. "No, thank you," sighed Camellia. What she really wanted was a nice plate of lima beans, but she had been laughed at enough for one day. Well, yes, I see," Dr. Bumble mumbled when Mr. Cream phoned the next day. "I think I better bring in the specialist. We'll be right over." About an hour later, Dr. Bumble arrived with 4 people in long white coats. The specialist went to work on Camellia. They squeezed, jabbed, tapped, tested. It was very uncomfortable. "Well, it's not the mumps," concluded Dr. Gropp, "or the measles. Definitely not chickenpox or sunburn." "Try these," said the specialist. They each handed her a bottle filled with different colored pills. "Take one of each before bed." Then they filed out the front door, followed by Dr. Bumble. By now, the TV news had found out about Camellia. Reporters from every channel were outside her house telling the story of the bizarre case of the incredible changing kid. Soon a huge crowd was camped out on the front lawn. Creams were swamped with all kinds of remedies, from psychologists, allergists, herbalists, nutritionists, psychics, an old medicine man, a guru, and even a veterinarian. Each so-called cure only added to poor Camelia's strange appearance until it was hard to even recognize her. She sprouted roots and berries and crystals and feathers and a long furry tail, but nothing worked. Oh my goodness. One day, a woman who called herself an environmental therapist claimed she could cure Camellia. Close your eyes, she said, breathe deeply and become one with your room. I wish you hadn't said that, Camellia groaned. Slowly, she started to melt into the walls of her room. Her bed became her mouth, her nose was a dresser, and 2 paintings were her eyes. The therapist screamed and ran from the house. What are we going to do? Cried Mrs. Cream. It just keeps getting worse and worse. She began to sob. At that very moment, Mr. Cream heard a quiet little knock at the front door. He opened it, and there stood an old woman who was just as plump and sweet as a strawberry. Excuse me, she said brightly, but I think I can help. She went into Camelia's room, looked around. My goodness, she said with a shake of her head, what we have here is a bad case of stripes, one of the worst I've seen. She pulled a container of small green beans from her bag. Here, she said, these might do the trick. Are those magic beans? Asked Mrs. Cream. Oh my, no, replied the kind old woman. There's no such thing. These are just plain old lima beans. I bet you'll like some, wouldn't you? She asked Camellia. Camellia wanted a big heaping plate full of lima beans more than anything, but she was still afraid to admit it. Yuck, she said. No one likes lima beans, especially me. Oh dear, the old woman said sadly. I guess I was wrong about you. She put the beans back into her bag and started toward the door. Camellia watched the old woman walk away. Those beans would taste so good, and being laughed at for eating them was nothing compared to what she'd been going through. She finally couldn't stand it. Wait, she cried. The truth is, I really love lima beans. I thought so, the old woman said with a smile. She took a handful of beans and popped them into Camelia's mouth. Said Camellia. Suddenly, the branches, feathers, and squiggly tails began to disappear. The whole room swirled around. When it stopped, there stood Camellia, and everything was back to normal. I'm cured, she shouted. Yes, said the old woman. I knew the real you was in there somewhere. She patted Camellia on the head. Then she went outside and vanished into the crowd. Afterward, Camellia wasn't quite the same. Some of the kids at school said she was weird, but she didn't care a bit. She ate all the lima beans she wanted, and she never had a touch of stripes again. And that's the end of our story. And I'm hoping you were able to hear the message of that story. There's a phrase that says, you should have your own stripes. I'm saying it all wrong. But the point is, it's important that everyone be who you're meant to be and embrace it. And if you have a bad case of the stripes, it means that you're blending in with everybody else and you're trying to fit in rather than being your very own person. So this story has a great message about the importance of trusting yourself, being who you are, and holding your head up high. So I love this story. I hope you liked it too.